So on one hand, we saw the resilience of the Nigerian people standing in line, willing to brave the heat, whatever it took to make sure that their voices were heard and that voted counts. So that's something we should all be very proud of. On the other hand, they had to be resilient, and that was unfortunate. We obviously saw and noted as an observer mission delayed poll openings, not always having the materials available, some confusion. And so while the people were resilient, the election administration process was not as smooth and not as transparent and not as effective as it can be and as it should be.
Thanks so much. What improvements can be made? I'm hesitant to use the United States as an example, but I best we can. In the United States, elections there are disaggregated at the state level. And so each individual state in the United States handles their own election operations. Should that be repeated? Is that a bridge too far? What are the improvements that can be made for INEC to be more efficient?
Well, so every country, every state, every community is different, right, in terms of the details, but it's the broad underlying principles that count most. And I think what we see here as a challenge is that there wasn't a dry run, there wasn't a test run done, there wasn't a stress test run done, so that we would have seen in advance some of the problems that were reported on election day. So I think it's insufficient planning, quite frankly. But most importantly, it's transparency. People in this country are hungry for democracy. The fact that you're covering these stories means that the media is hungry for democracy and elections and voting. And I think INEC would be well served to be 100% transparent all the time. So on election day, if there are problems that pop up, simply hold a press conference or put out a statement saying, look, here's the problem. This is why, and this is how long it will take to fix it. I think when there's silence, that creates a vacuum. And then people get fearful. They start to get suspicious. And so I think one of the most important things is for INEC to be transparent and to constantly be sharing whatever results they have, sharing whatever problems they see with journalists and with the public.
Thank you, Ambassador Green. Now, one thing that you pointed out that's crucial is communication. And we have definitely seen that, at least from what analysts have said, that INEC has not necessarily done the best job in terms of the pace of communication, in terms of how quickly matters are being addressed. We just saw something happen at the Coalition Center, even though people were told that that's not the place to, make your issues known, and that's strictly Coalition Center. And we also see that when it comes to uploading the results on the IREV, that's not being done real time. So how much grace should we actually give, and how much understanding should we actually give INEC regarding this communication aspect? There is so much room for speculation.
Well, I think that last point that you just made is the key one. So anybody who administers elections, INEC or those who administer it in the United States, you don't have to have all of the answers in order to communicate and be transparent with the public. Instead, simply be honest about what you're facing. So if you've got particular problems, if you've got shortages, simply say, we have shortages. People are understanding. People are patient. It's when nothing is said that people start to fear the worst. They get suspicious. And in some cases, there isn't a reason to be suspicious. I think what we would say is that so many of the misunderstandings could be avoided by simply saying things publicly. I'd like to go back to something that you said, and it's very, very important. I would never say that the U.S. and our democracy has all the answers. What I often say is, look, as a democracy that's still learning, perhaps we've made all the mistakes. You don't have to make the mistakes that we have made. You can learn from our own experience of mistakes. Close friend of Nigeria, U.S.-Nigeria relations are very solid. We share democratic values, so we can learn from each other. That's why we're here as election observers.
Ambassador Green, I'm just going to follow up on something you said. Well, you said democracy is a journey. Are you giving INEC a bit of a pass? Because to be frank here, how hard really is it to administer these elections? We're talking about a logistics exercise where you simply have to provide set materials You've had 4 years to prepare because these elections happen every 4 years. You talked about insufficient planning, for example. Is it really that hard, Ambassador Green? Is it really that difficult? Should we be here?
Well, what I can say is that the NDI-IRI Joint Observer Mission, we actually did 2 pre-election assessments as well last year. And what we noted is that doing a test run, doing a stress run would be a great way to avoid the problem. And I think that's one of the things that should have been done. We look at this as a missed opportunity. There was a good opportunity here to advance democracy in ways that the Nigerian citizens could be proud of. Clearly, the Nigerian people are strong believers in democracy. We saw it at the polls. But unfortunately, the administration fell short. And so what we would say is, let's learn from the lessons. It is important. This was a missed opportunity. And let's make sure that as this story continues to be written of democracy, we learn these lessons and we're honest with each other on the shortcomings that we've all seen.
Ambassador Green, in your joint statement released with Her Excellency President Joyce Banda, you noted that the election fell well short of Nigerian citizens' reasonable expectations. Now, on election day, the word voter disenfranchisement was being thrown around a lot. What are your observations? Would you go as far as to call what you witnessed on election day, what you observed on election day, as disenfranchisement?
Well, what I can say, and it's obviously in our statement, that we observed a number of situations where voters felt as though they were disenfranchised because either of the fallout from the cash crisis or confusion over voter lists or polls opening up late or the BVOT system not working as well as it should have. All of those together clearly, hurt the involvement of voters. So to that extent, I would say that it hurt the participation of Nigerians in the election process.
Ambassador Green, if you're planning a wedding, you outsource that to a wedding planner. If you're planning a dinner, you outsource it to a caterer. I run a business show on the Arise Television on the broadcast, and we talk a lot about privatization and government getting out of the way of the private enterprise. Can this be? If you think about some of the challenges that we've seen with individuals, voters having to provide tables and markers and lights and generators and equipment, can this exercise, do you think it can be outsourced to be more efficient?
Well, that's really a decision for Nigerians to make. What I can say is that so many of the problems that you just pointed to and that we've all read about were avoidable and they were foreseeable. And I think that's what the frustration is. You noted it, we've heard it from other people. Look, we've had time. Now, the Election Reform Act of 2022 was a step forward and brought about some reforms, but clearly this falls short of the kinds of democracy or the administration of democracy that Nigerians deserve.
That's good. Thank you. This election has been hailed for a number of reasons, including the fact that it was not postponed. But I'm curious, based on what you saw play out in the past days, not just on Saturday, would it have been okay for INEC to postpone these elections, seeing that they were actually not ready from what we're seeing play out?
Well, again, that's a decision for Nigerians. I would say on my own part, personally, I'm glad it wasn't postponed. I think people were anxious to exercise their vote and express their voice, and that expression is important, especially with gubernatorial elections coming up quickly. So imperfect as this may be, we'll all be watching carefully. At the end of the day, Nigerians will need to decide whether these elections were credible in the sense that they captured the will of the people. We'll all be watching the results as they come in. The sooner they come in, the more transparently they come in, the better, obviously. But what we can say, what we do know, is that Nigerians are hungry for democracy, they're hungry to vote, they're willing to stand in line, and they deserve an administration and an oversight that I think is worthy of that.
Right. Now, the world is watching, but more importantly, Africa is watching. On a slightly more positive note, I'd love to know, what do you feel that other African democracies can learn from the exercise that we've just witnessed here in Nigeria? There must be some positive takeaways.
Oh, very much. So, again, the hunger to vote, the people want to vote. I think also the lessons around planning and planning for contingencies. With gas shortages and fuel shortages, obviously, you really have to plan well in advance. And again, I keep coming back to it, but I think doing stress tests and test runs and making sure that you go through practice runs before you ever go live in public with voting. I think Nigeria can certainly provide lessons for other African democracies.
Ambassador Green, you mentioned the gubernatorial elections is coming up in about 12 days. If we were to have this conversation with you in 13 days' time after the gubernatorial election, do you think there's enough time for improvements to be made?
Oh, there are always opportunities for improvements, and clearly some of the statements that we've heard from INEC and others suggest a recognition of changes that need to be made, organization and papers and opening of polls. So it's never too late. So we're all looking forward to learning lessons and moving forward.
Well, Ambassador Green, before this election took place on Saturday, February the 25th, there was also a mock accreditation that happened. And most of the issues that were raised and recommendations that were made, we actually saw them play out on election day. So I'm wondering at this point, should we have seen more accreditation exercises from INEC? It seems we've lost Ambassador Green. Can you confirm if we have it? Ambassador Green, can you hear me, please? Okay, Ambassador, if you can hear me, I was saying that before the February 25th election, INEC had the opportunity of carrying out the mock accreditation. And most of the issues that were raised and recommendations that were made, it doesn't look as though, first of all, the issues that were raised were truly addressed and that the recommendations were followed through. Would you suggest that more mock accreditation exercises be done, maybe way before the election is supposed to happen, and more frequency?
Yes, certainly, and that even goes back to some of the recommendations that were made in the pre-election assessment. Look, Nigeria is a big country, it's a complex country, it has a wide range in its geography and such, so yes, I think advanced testing, as you put it, mock accreditation, I think that's a wise idea.
All right. In your release, you made reference, of course, to the much celebrated reforms of the Electoral Act 2022. Now that you've experienced the nuances of a Nigerian election, a beautiful document, I believe we all agree, is it achievable in any reasonable, foreseeable future?
Oh, most definitely. It requires the dedication, obviously, of officials and the people. So I'll give you one real strong sign of optimism. Who administered on the local level so many of the elections were young people. We were impressed with some of the young people and their resourcefulness. You made some reference to in places where there were insufficient supplies or tables, how hard they worked to make sure that there was an opportunity to vote. I think that's a real sign of optimism. I think another reason for optimism, when I looked at the long lines that we saw in some places where the polls opened late and the material were a little bit late in coming, nobody left. And people stood there in an orderly fashion and talked about the importance of voting and made it clear. So I think there are lots of reasons for optimism, and the will of the people of Nigeria is strong and vibrant. So I do believe that they will continue to bring about these reforms, other lessons that we're all learning. So I think democracy in Nigeria is definitely moving in the right direction.
Ambassador Green, speaking of moving in certain directions, we're in the digital age. We've got central banks around the world that are looking at, digitized, central bank digitized, currency, CBDCs, and you've got Bitcoin, you've got cryptocurrencies. electronic voting. Now, of course, the Nigerian Constitution doesn't allow for that. We had a special report looking at voting with the possibility of voting with mobile phones. We talked to INEC about it, and individuals in the private sector, they all said we're not quite ready for that yet. What's the future of voting looking like to you, Ambassador Green? And can technology play a role? If we're having this conversation with you 30, 40 years from now, what does voting look like? Can technology ease the process based on your observation?
Sure. First off, I'm like those in the private sector that you spoke to. I don't think we're quite there yet. But most definitely, we are well into the digital age, we're into the virtual age. And so I think that there are lots of ways that we can better harness technology. Technology done right breaks down distances in a country, again, as big and as diverse as Nigeria is. Technology will be our friend as we continue to move forward. I think it will also be helpful with such things as absentee voting, which is one of the recommendations that we make, is to take a look at beginning to develop absentee voting. But all of those are made more possible with technology. We all recognize there are dangers in technology and we need cybersecurity, absolutely. But there's no turning back. We're increasingly in a digital age, and I think digital democracy will be an important part of the future.
Ambassador Mark Green, President and CEO of the Woodrow Wilson International Center for Scholars and former administrator of the United States Agency for International Development. We thank you for your time and your contribution. Thank you so much. But we're still in Abuja, where European Union election observers are giving their report on the ongoing Nigeria election.
As regards making a difference, each election observation mission stands on its own merits. So we deployed here in early January and we began our process then. Nevertheless, our methodology means that we come back sometimes within 3 or 4 years to examine whether or not the previous missions conclusions and recommendations are leading to actual implementation. And the previous mission came back a year ago and examined the 30 recommendations and found that 13 of them were already implemented or partially implemented, which is, I think, indicative that we do make a difference, that our efforts serve to deepen the roots of democracy here in Nigeria, and we think it's the investment of time and expertise of our core team or our long-term observers is appreciated, and if there is criticism, it is received in the spirit in which it's given, which is a mutual respect and an insistence on the standards of democracy, which Nigeria already aligns itself to, and the standards that are contained in legislation here in Nigeria.
Thank you so much, the Chief Observer. We'll take more questions if there are more questions.
Just one here.
Yes, please.
Afternoon. My name is Chiamaka Okafo. I work for Premium Times. I have a few questions. First is to Mr. Andrews. In your speech, you made mention of lack of transparency and corrupt planning from INEC. I'd like you to expatiate on that. And to the head of the EP delegation, talked about instigation of violence and, of course, violence through the process on Saturday. 2 questions there. Are you concerned about post-election violence? Did you get that? Post-election violence. And then secondly, unlike your counterparts, the US and the UK, there's been a promise to impose visa bans and sanctions on people who are found culpable for instigating violence through this process. Are you also looking at that too for political parties or political actors who are found guilty? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. On the transparency, we first of all, we acknowledge that INEC had to conduct this election in challenging circumstances. And we are very conscious that the Electoral Act provides a very important legislative basis and framework that instilled a lot of trust in INEC in the run-up to the election from political participants and encouraged many people to take part. However, the publication of figures in relation to permanent voting cards and how they had been distributed across polling units was not made available. The information about the distribution of permanent voting cards across states was made available very late in the process, so that it was very difficult for citizens, members of the public here in Nigeria to verify or in any way audit the accuracy of those PVC numbers. And clearly that goes to the transparency of the election, and it is an area which we have noted in our preliminary statement. I'll just mention I'll let Evan speak to the question that was directed to her on security in due course. But on visa bans, the mandate of this mission is of any sort. We're here simply to observe the mission. That's a matter for the European Youth in the European Council. We are aware that other jurisdictions have made those calls, but it doesn't fall within the mandate of this mission whatsoever, which is considered interference in the process. We're here simply to do that, and that's what has engendered a high degree of trust and credibility on the type of findings, conclusions, and recommendations that we make. So I'll hand over, Evan, if you want to address the question.
Thank you very much, Barry, and thank you for the question. As stated in the statement, we of course condemn all kind of violence that has taken place, and we also call on all actors to adhere and respect the rules that are in place, and in any case of any dispute, that all disputes are sorted out with legal procedures. So this is our call on all actors in Nigeria, that all disputes should be sorted out through legal procedures, and we hope that everybody will respect and adhere to that. Thank you. Thank you so much. We are still taking more questions, please. Yes, please go ahead. Introduce yourself and the media.
So the question was, what mark would we give to the election? Now, our methodology doesn't allow for anything as clear as a mark. You can give a mark to me as a performing as a chief observer if you wish, but so we judged right around election observation. And also on the criteria that are contained in international conventions, like the Convention on Civil and Political Rights that Nigeria is a signatory to, and against the legislative framework that applies here in Nigeria. So, and I also want to emphasize that we're midway through the process. The collation and tabulation is still going on as we speak in other parts of Abuja and across the country. So it would be, it's certainly not something that we would do in any circumstances, but we try to assess the election on the basis of inclusivity and transparency and credibility, and we'll continue to gather up information as time goes on. Thank you.
Thank you again. Do we have more questions?
All right, that's Barry Andrews, Chief Observer with the European Union Election Observers, European Mission, giving their observations on the election. I said we're still in Abuja, the APC, All Progressive Congress, they are now addressing the nation in their press conference. Let's take a listen.
Concerns and call on the state security services and the Nigerian police force to immediately restrain persons such as Melaye, Momodu, and a certain pastor called Enenche of Dunamis Church. They should be restrained from their clear cause to violence. Melaye's tweets threatening violence, Momodu going on TV to announce a purported winner, and Enenche's hate speech from the pulpit clearly violates every law of the land. They should not go scot-free. When failure stared them in the face, rather than accepting the outcome with dignity like good Democrats would, some sore losers began shopping for ways to cut corners or scuttle the process. We have seen so many doctored results giving false victory to the Labour Party in places where it performed abysmally poor. The idea was to give its followers hope and prepare them for a planned street insurrection. The PDP has employed almost similar tactics, despite secretly admitting defeat. They went about with mouth-watering offers, looking for willing partners that would help them to subvert the will of the people. Perhaps, having failed to procure officials to help it doctor results, the PDP earlier today rented willing television station airwaves to make very dangerous statements on the election. We also wonder why agents of the party at the Abuja Convention Center are pushing insistently for the uploading of the results on the INEC portal when Section 60 of the Electoral Act is clear about who has the power to do so at the polling unit. The state commission officer has no such power. The INEC chairman, who collects what has been collected from the states, also has no such power. Is the PDP therefore calling for the uploads to enable it to hack the system to give it a false victory? Unlike what the PDP spokesmen have done, we will not announce ourselves as winners despite having the figures which affirm our anticipated victory. We will abide by the laws by allowing the electoral umpire to do its job. A cursory look at the figures from across the states show that our candidate is well placed for victory. The results have shown that the Labour Party, as we kept saying, is no threat nationally to our victory. The PDP, on the other hand, has also failed in its own permutation, making its dream of victory go up in smoke. The PDP's projection of a landslide win in the north has absolutely collapsed. For example, the PDP celebrated victory in Katsina State was only with a difference of less than 7,000 votes. On the other hand, the APC maintains a comfortable lead of over 30,000 and 150,000 in nearby Jigawa and Zamfara states, respectively. The bad news for PDP, however, is its dismal performance in Kano, where the APC is emerging with over 600,000 votes difference ahead of the PDP. This is a monumental figure which offsets the PDP in the entire north. The trend is the same in the south, where PDP is very poor show in Lagos, Oyo, Rivers, and other key states spell doom for the party. The little gains made by the PDP in the south, and southeast are too little to compensate for the party's huge deficit suffered in the southwest. In the north central, the APC has decimated all parties to a comfortable majority votes in Kwara, Kogi, and Niger. Our impressive show in Benue, FCT, and Plateau is also pushing PDP into third position in those places. Taken together, we are very upbeat, as the numbers do not lie. We call on the opposition to stop the macabre dance of the down horse and embrace defeat honorably. There can still be honor in defeat. We once again call for maturity and restraint. Nigerians have spoken through the ballot, and the umpire must be allowed to do its work without harassment or blackmail. Security agents should stay on alert and deal with individuals and groups who are planning to foment trouble. Election is not war. This is democracy and play. And everybody in this country knows that our own candidate, our presidential candidate, is a committed Democrat who has a track record and antecedents in deepening democracy, fighting for democracy, nurturing democracy, and therefore is the only avatar of democracy in this day. We once again thank Nigerians for subscribing to our message on Relico and ask our supporters to remain calm and hopeful as we will ensure that their votes are not manipulated by any ethnic power-mongering person, subversive elements, or serial users. Thank you, gentlemen. Yes. Issues have been raised regarding the legal provision of loading results, because that's the core of that context. So I don't think we would like to address that. We will not be here and skip that. And we don't skip that. That is the crux of all the complaints going on. That results must be uploaded before they are announced at the Relation Center. So we don't want to run away from that issue. And I think it's important for us to address that. Now, let me attend to this. Okay? Your voice is loud enough. Okay? Your voice is loud enough. Now, the conduct of election, the counting of votes, and the declaration of results are regulated by three or four documents. One, the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Two, the Electoral Act, which subsequently gives powers to INEC to make regulations for the conduct of those elections. And so you now have also the INEC regulations and guidelines. In that order, first, it is the Constitution that is supreme. In its supremacy, what the concerned body does in Schedule 3 is to establish INEC and gives INEC the general powers to conduct elections into all offices, at the federal level in Nigeria. That is for the Constitution. Now, the Electoral Act, if you see, the Constitution now says that the ways by which INEC should conduct those elections should be regulated by an act of the National Assembly. That is what the Constitution says in Chapter 3, in Schedule 3. Now, that is what gave the National Assembly the powers to then make the Electoral Act. What does the Electoral Act say? Because I'm coming to this issue of IREV and uploading results. The Electoral Act, if you look at Section 60 of the Electoral Act, Section 60 clearly prescribes the mode by which results are entered step by step until the announcement of the result. In fact, the provisions begin from Section 45 all through to Section 68. Go and look at those provisions. It talks about manual entry of those results in different forms, from the unit level, to the ward level, to the local government level, to the state levels, and then to the national collation center. That is the provision of the electoral. Therefore, in all of these provisions I've mentioned, there has been no provision regarding uploading results on INEC to an IREV or somewhere with the result possible. It is also to Section 70 now, where INEC now says, well, that says that, well, INEC can still make guidelines, because the electoral gives INEC power to make guidelines for the conduct of those elections. It is that in those guidelines that you now see that INEC makes provision for the declaration of results. Now, before that, let me draw your attention to Section 68 of the Electoral Act. Section 68 says that when results have been declared, those results will be posted on a site, the public place for everyone to see, and on INEC's website. That is what the law itself says. The Electoral Act, it is after the declaration of results. So, those provisions you then see in guidelines about uploading results to an IREV and all that, they are not strictly in tandem with the provisions of our law. The Constitution, the Electoral Act, they are arrangements made for INEC for ease of the process. And if you look at all the Supreme Court decisions There's no Supreme Court decision that has said that the guidelines of INEC override the provisions of both the Electoral Act and the Constitution. We have all the provisions, all the decisions of the Supreme Court. All the decisions. It was on the basis of that, if you remember, that the other thing they use for accreditation was called. This was not the other one, they want to call that. That was the other one, but the Supreme Court. That's the Electoral Act, the register. It's still that is very so difficult because those provisions, first of all, appear in guidelines of INEC. But then when people insisted that cases in 2015 and 2019, where Libyans who insisted that the provisions of the guidelines were not followed, what did the Supreme Court say? The Supreme Court said the guidelines are just for the views of the process of INEC, that the major provision of the law is as prescribed by the Constitution of the Federal Government and the Electoral Act. So, gentlemen, what you are seeing going on in PDP is drama without substance. It is drama without substance in law. So, we are ready to meet them anywhere. If you think that INEC procedure has been subverted, if you think that INEC has subverted the position of the law in releasing the results, we will meet them anywhere in court. Because we said that there is no such provision legally binding on INEC, legally binding on INEC, and that overrides provision of both the Constitution and the Electoral Act that says that results must be uploaded before they are declared. What the law still recognizes is the manual step-by-step collection until the announcement of the result at the National Collection Center as provided by law. That's it. It's not the parliamentary. I want you to simply ask the PDP. It's not INEC for the LP, they are trying to go for the translation of the result. Yeah, well and good. We'll bring them anywhere. But for the PDP, I want you to ask a critical question to all these drama kings you are seeing up and down, making all these answers. Have you picked up a particular result for the particular state and compare it with the ones your agent submitted? And tell me which unit has been altered, which one result has been altered, which state result has been tell me one. Because your objection will be based on actual figures that were manipulated, not on the procedure. You cannot tell us now that they have not seen results from their own agents. I therefore challenge them. I want to challenge PDP. Publish results for these things that your agents put pictures of. And you have to challenge results declared by the National Commission. So I want you to see this more of what we are doing. I want to understand it. Let INEC tell us, let PDP tell us, in a particular state, show us all the complete cases. Show us all the results you enter at the world level and tell the world which discrepancy did you see in the world now at the National Commission Center. So that's right. I want to say at the end of the day that what is happening in the PDP and all the drama you see from those actors and the National Commission Center is nothing but all in the teacup. There's no sense in what they are saying. Thank you.
But you need to say that. So sorry. Ladies and gentlemen, let me just add to what David has said and what my brother Festus has said. And I just want to say a couple of things very quickly. First of all, it's very clear that the words of the lion behavior today, like Shakespeare, a tale told by an Indian, full of sound and fury, signifying absolutely nothing. And we need to be very careful at this stage. We are confident of victory. We know that we are going to win this election because we've done our research. But we don't make noise. We want everybody to be cool, everybody to be calm as we coast to that victory. But what they are doing is trying to heat up the polity, provoke us, intimidate our voters and our supporters, threaten us morning, day, and night, and ensure that we react to them. We won't do that. But one thing I will say, just to add to what everybody else said, and if you don't remember anything that I've said today, please remember this. The minute those results are announced, and we, by the grace of God, are declared as the winner, we will defend our votes. No matter what, Pastor Paul Eleche, Kino Milai, and all the rest of them say, David Omodu, all the rest of them, no matter what they say or do, particularly the Obedience, who have intimidated and threatened our voters, beaten our voters in some parts, particularly in the East, beaten our voters and our supporters. I have all the evidence here on my phone, threatened them, particularly the women. There's nothing they haven't been subjected to. The minute that result is announced, we will not be intimidated. We will defend our votes, we'll protect this mandate, and those that have the idea of a June 12th annulment by creating crisis because they didn't win, we should perish the thought. It will not happen under this watch, by God's grace. Thank you.
Questions? Thank you very much for that question. Yeah, we all saw what emerged in Lagos, the results that came out today. The Labour Party had a very slight lead, but a lead all the same, you know. And honestly, we have always said this, and I did say it a few moments ago, that our candidate is the avatar of democracy in this season, in this country today. He has fought strenuously to enthrone this democracy. He has acted in government to deepen this democracy. And he has demonstrated his commitment, unalloyed, unavowed to democracy. So he's taking it in his stride. We are all taking it in our stride as committed Democrats, because we do not want anything to derail this democracy, hard fought for and hard won. Now, those who are bellyaching all around, issuing threats that if they do not win, there will be fire and brimstone and all that. I ask you, how many of them were in the barricades fighting for this democracy? They were not there. So they do not appreciate democracy. They do not understand the dynamics and nuances and the convention of democracy. So they have no stake in this democracy. That's why they can say there will be fire and brimstone. In fact, some Obedience are they calling for the return of the military. They are not declared the winner of this election. And that is very, very sad. That will show you that these are not Democrats. And I repeat, because they never took part in the democratic struggle, they never acted in deepening and sustaining this democracy. It is easy for them to want to scuttle it. For those of us who are part and parcel of the democratic struggle, we knew what we went through. Our principal went through the crucibles, harassment, oppression, suppression, and the whole works to get this democracy in place. So we are prepared to nurture it. And the result in Lagos is also an eloquent testimony to the fairness of this process. If anything, any lesson is to be drawn from the Lagos results today, it is that when Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu is eventually declared by the umpire INEC as the legitimately elected president of this country, nobody should complain about the process, because the process has been demonstrably fair and just, as exemplified by the results in Lagos, which we are not even contesting now. We are taking it in our strides as Democrats, but it is a testimony to the freeness and fairness of this process. So let nobody come and complain when we have declared the winner that, oh, they've been rigged out. If we did not rig them out in Lagos, we are not about to rig them out anywhere else. So our victory is established and verified by what has happened in Lagos today. Thank you.
Sorry, yes. Thank you. 16.
And but behind the chairman, getting the results,
Alright, we're currently live from Abuja at a press briefing by the APC Presidential Campaign Council. We've heard from Dele Alake, who is a media advisor to the Presidential Campaign Council, who implored the police to immediately restrain Dino Melaye, Dele Momodu, and Pastor Enechi for what he is calling alleged incitement of violence. Dino Melaye via social media, Dele Momodu via television, and Pastor Enechi via the pulpit. He accused both the Labour Party and the PDP of planning a street insurrection and of planning to subvert the will of the people. That is currently happening live from Abuja. Also seems to have been a response to the broadcast we saw earlier by the Director for Strategic Communication for the PDP, that's Dele Momodu. Several back and forths happening. However, what they did clarify, what Bayo Onanuga did clarify during this press briefing is that they're not trying to join these issues. They're not trying to join the issue that result sheets should be loaded up onto the BVAS, onto the IREV, excuse me. That's not why they've called this press conference. They've called this press conference specifically because they feel that their opponents feel that they are losing and are ready to play dirty tactics. These are their allegations.
For me, I'm thinking when I see stuff like this, it might incite a reaction from supporters, which I don't think. And from what we heard earlier from former president of South Africa, Thabo Mbeki, where he was urging for restraint. I think right now everybody just needs to sit back and let the process play out, because tempers are high. There's a lot of distrust in the air, and making statements like this, whether it's the APC, PDP, or whatever party, making addressing the press and making different allegations, calling for different actions, it might incite a reaction and actually fuel the fire as opposed to dousing the tension. I don't know how you feel about
it. I think it speaks to the fact that this is a very competitive election, and it's exciting, and the two parties are trying to preempt each other with whatever results come forward. Your point is well noted. You want to make sure you don't incite anyone, but it's incredibly exciting. It's competitive. They both referenced the Labour Party, and so very interesting. All right, we're gonna our senior correspondent Oba Adeoye, boots on the ground. He's been doing so much work going around Lagos, tracking the elections. He joins us now from the field. Oba, you're in Ladipo, Mushi. Thank you so much for joining us. What is the latest? What is the temperature right there where you are?
Yes, right now, shops are locked in Ladipo here. If you are conversant with this part of Lagos, it's a very busy part. Usually, on a Monday like this, Ladipo is usually busy that you hardly find space for your car or even for yourself if you're trekking. But today the roads, within Ladipo is very free, very, very free. The shops are locked, but we have traders looking around, just hanging around. And I spoke with a couple of them earlier this morning. They told me that they are apprehensive, that they are waiting for the announcement of the results before they know what to do. They complain that indeed it's affecting our business, but it's a sacrifice they have to make. Because of the fear of what the aftermath of the election may bring. And this morning when we reached here, we saw a couple of soldiers at the Fatah Atere Junction stroke this Ladipo road. But right now, at the moment, we have more numbers of soldiers. They are standing by in their vehicles. We have seen about 2 armored tanks here because early in the morning, we got feelers that some hoodlums were planning or they were advancing towards this direction to attack traders here who are predominantly of Igbo descent. They said they are coming to attack them, and everybody, you know, had to disperse. We also had to leave here to stay somewhere close by to avoid the data. But when we saw that the number of soldiers and the number of security men generally had increased, we had to come back here, you know, to see things for ourselves. A particular video is trending online. A particular video is trending online. I don't know if you have seen that video where there's an inferno. We don't know what is being burnt in that video. We have seen the video with claims that it's happening in Ladipo in Mushin. Right now, I can confirm to you that nothing of sort is happening in Ladipo. We have visited, you know, every corner in the Ladipo market, and nothing of sort is happening. So it's either it's a completely fake news or that it did not happen in this Ladipo. We spoke with some of the traders, and someone suggested that maybe it's happening in another Ladipo in Oshodi, because there's another Ladipo in Oshodi for people who are conversant with Lagos. We have not been there. We'll go there to go and check. But yeah, Ladipo where they sell spare parts, there is nothing of sort as we speak. You can see the traders are just, you know, standing by their shops. Their shops are under lock and keys. Everybody's standing around, you know, and I can see some level of confidence and peace in their mind right now that they have seen, you know, more soldiers, more military men around. Moments ago, you saw a military truck pass through the camera. I just stood beside the one there before I moved to this point. You can see some traders, even some commercial motorcyclists are, you know, are doing brisk business here, but business has been done generally for them because on a normal day, the tricyclists would not be scampering for passengers the way they are doing right now. Some of them are practically on holiday. You can see, like the one behind me right here, the cameraman can see, they are practically on holiday. Let me speak with some of them and see what happens. Good afternoon, sir. What's your name, sir? What's your name?
My name was Monsu Adika.
Okay.
How to activate your GoCoder. Now, sit back and get set to enjoy all GoTV has to offer. GoTV, love it. It's time to go get value.
Dropping from part of her bandaged face, she said, though, that she was going through pain, that she was determined to cast her vote for her preferred candidate. Adediran described her action as a big encouragement to all Nigerians that the resilience of the citizens to participate in how they are governed cannot be broken by any act of intimidation.
Getting to the polling unit, I did my verification. Yeah, that to be sure that that is my polling unit, and I was on the queue. the queue wasn't really moving because people were coming in from the front, so I just had to sit down. So later after some time, some group of guys just came like that, and it was obvious they were not voters, they didn't come to vote. But the pump close to us, the bus left. So we were still there, the exercise was still going on. And let me say for after like 45 to 1 hour, there was a chaos. I just felt an impact because I was just sitting down going through my phone. I just felt a huge impact on my face, and I heard a gunshot simultaneously. I even felt I was shocked at first because when I put my hand on my face, I felt blood dripping. And people were running every helter and skelter. A lady had courage to apply hanky or cloth, I don't know, on it to stop the bleeding, but I was still bleeding profusely. They tried to first take me into hiding, at least let's get shelter. We don't know if the guys were still coming inside the compound we ran into. So I was there and transferred to another place. They had to be sure that they had gone so that I'll get access to a nurse that stays around to administer first aid.
For somebody to have been that injured and returned back to the police unit to cast a vote, nothing can be more patriotic. I appreciate can-do ability, can-do spirit. And that's the only way we can end this madness. For Madame, it doesn't matter what she voted for yesterday, about the fact that what she did, is for everybody. What she did sends is some sort of courage to all of us that we can stand firm. And to those who did that, I was just wondering if you say you build a state, I don't think you should ask people to vote for you to continue leading that state. If you say you are the father of Lagos, I don't think you need to coerce anybody for you to remain state. Unfortunately, I've not heard the state government coming out to condemn this violent attack on Lagosians yesterday. But like I said, their days are numbered. Everything they like, let them do. We're going to dislodge them. After this one that they are doing, we will see them again.
We certainly celebrate Jephthah for her resilience and commitment to nation. But this isn't where we'll be dropping anchor on this segment of the Arise continuous coverage of 2023 presidential and National Assembly elections. We'll take a short break now, and when we come back, Howard Makan, Aaron Akerijola, and Temitope Fabemi would take over anchor duties from us. I'm Bambai Mutinidi Epe.
Rosie Sodiri, thanks for staying with us.
And I'm Cynthia Are, and we would like to seize this opportunity to thank everyone that has contributed to this segment, including our esteemed analysts and commentators, correspondents in the field, in-studio producers, and of course, our wonderful followers all over the world. I'm Cynthia Are. Have a good day.
Whether you snatch ballot boxes or beavers or not, these days it doesn't matter. The technology has gone beyond the primitive rigging system that the political actors are used to.
In Ghana, no accreditation was done. The SPA disappeared with the result sheet, and they have not been found up till now. So whatever happens, I make the election is not as easy as the body. But from going to everyone, they're going to want everyone's trust. People now trying to trust the life of people. So everyone wants to carry out and enjoy it. But I think
bimodal voting and accreditation system is one innovation that everybody's applauding. It took a few seconds for me to be identified. And I think if it continues that way, it is one development that has come to stay.
Any incident at all, it will be reflective of what we've seen here in all of the 20 units that we have in the state and in the country at large.
You selling my program. I worked more than any other politician in this country to show the capacity and what is necessary. It is very difficult to determine by mere appearance who is a minor or not. Most of the ones you are seeing, maybe their genetic, their growth rate might be impaired. All those that you see voting, they are those that have been approved by INEC, and I cannot change it. We are confident in what we do. I will thank God for the very peaceful election. I'm not going to thank you for what we see at the moment. I will take them to the president to ensure that there is fairness in this election. This is the more credible concept than previous ones. And I think it is good that we are giving them every election cycle. That's a fraud. For someone to transfer to a place, he or she is not legal. It's a fraud. I'm confident because we made adequate preparations to ensure that every polling unit has at least 5 security personnel.
Politicians are supposed to be friendly messages. We must conduct our first very flexibly that with our supporters, relatives, and so on. So we know that this is the clean business.
We have never been the kind of people that would incite anything besides. This is I just a bullet. This is my bullet. If somebody goes out there to let them shoot at us. I tell them don't shoot bullet. Put them in there and play at us.
What we worried was that the election here started after 11. And when he voted out, we have thousands of people there. And not only that, immediately I finished voting, the machine went bad. And now they are struggling to get it.
We have worked for INEC for at least 3 days, and INEC have agreed to give us ballot paper and boxes and other devices like grievers to work with it. And when you refuse to pay us on our feeding allowances and our transport allowances, we use our leg with ballot paper and beavers to our polling units.
That what unites us surpasses whatever that divides us. What is important for us is the people. Irrespective of differences in political affiliations, religious fascinations, tribal fascinations, and background. It's after the election.
Army is here, civil defense is here, the access is here, police is here. We only have our PPC. We want to vote. We have stayed for 3 days without sleeping and without eating. How election will be conducted successfully?
Nigerians, the 2023 Nigeria General Elections is here. Ensure that you have your PVC and locate your polling unit as you set out to vote. At your polling unit, queue and present your PVC for accreditation by INEC. On receipt of the ballot paper, vote discreetly for the candidate of your choice. Remember, there are standards of behavior required of voters on election day, and violators may be arrested. No buying and selling of votes, no intimidation or coercion of voters, no canvassing for votes, shouting of party slogans, or display of party symbols at polling units. Nigerians, the time has come to exercise your franchise. Turn out in full and cast your vote for the candidate of your choice. This message is brought to you by Policy and Legal Advocacy Centre, PLAC, with support from the UK Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, FCDO.
My name is Abdulrashid Bawa, the Executive Chairman, Economic and Financial Crimes Commission. I want to use this medium to urge all Nigerians to eschew all manner of electoral fraud, either through vote buying, vote selling, or fraudulent manipulations of electoral processes. I'm fully persuaded that we can run our electioneering processes devoid of any form of criminality. Let us all be committed to a free, fair, and credible dealings in the exercise of our democratic rights. Thank you.
Report any electoral fraud to the following numbers. You can also send any relevant information to info@efcc.gov.ng or to all our social media platforms at official EFCC. Also, use the EFCC mobile app, the Eagle Eye, to report. Your vote is your power. Protect it.
Good afternoon and welcome to this segment of the Arise News continuous coverage of the presidential and the National Assembly elections. Great job indeed to our own inviting to Mary Epeyong, Rhoda Sodiri, and of course Cynthia Aaron. I'm Hawa Mukar.
And I'm Aaron Akurja. Welcome to the show.
I'm Tanisha Kwefagwimi. For the next 3 hours, we shall be bringing you all you want to know about Nigeria's presidential and National Assembly elections. Stay with us.
And Arise analyst Frank Tietia is with us in our Abuja studio to discuss the conduct of the election so far and where the pendulum is likely to swing eventually. Good afternoon and welcome to the show, Frank. I'm sure you were busy yesterday. We saw you covering a lot and giving a lot of analysis, and we're asking for some more this afternoon. So really briefly, your assessment of these elections and the way INEC has allowed it to unfold. It has been quite a lot of not pleasant commentary. It's, you know, we're all waiting in limbo to see what happens next. Can you give us your own assessment of how the elections have been conducted in the last few days?
Thank you very much, and my pleasure. Well, you know, the elections had an initial good start.
it was filled with a lot of hopes, and we saw all these visuals coming in of the BVAS machine working seamlessly, and then the shift came, the turn into the storm, where INEC did eventually prove that it had everything under its control. Its ad hoc staff and permanent staff started carrying on forms of dereliction of duty, for which I believe strongly that a number of them should actually be punished at the end of the day. They didn't show up, and if they showed up at the polling venue, they did so late, and all of those are outlined as offenses under the Electoral Act. And INEC has been battling, it's been trying to redeem its image, because it has been receiving bashing from both local and international election observers. Civil society situation room concluded that its failure to make available electoral materials amounted to voter suppression and almost resembled one form of collusion or the other. Lagos was the epicenter of INEC's failure at that time. INEC struggled so hard against trying to put up an explanation why the much talked about application of technology, BVAS, and the speedy uploading of results to its result viewing portal wasn't working at all. It was practically shut down. INEC battled to a point where it could restore it, and we saw trickles of results being posted there, even though they were done in so poorly, where it is expected, or it was expected, that results should have been uploaded. We saw pictures of core members being uploaded in such a manner that was quite embarrassing. What is more important is that INEC seems to be having its hands back on control of the elections. Collations have been going. Results coming out from the various centers, whether the local government collation center or the state collation centers, have been quite been steady and consistent, to the extent that tensions are dying down. What is very important at this time is that Nigeria is having an election, and the world is watching, and some of African countries are actually here in Abuja trying to learn from the Nigerian experience, because they appreciate the complexity of the Nigerian state, the multiplicity of ethnic groups, and the fact that the tensions are high. The competition for political power is next to nothing in the whole world when it comes to Nigeria. So they came to learn how Nigeria would manage this election, and I'm sure they have quite a lot to learn. In the long run, the application of technology appears to be paying off for Nigeria now, because we didn't expect that the results would even come this quickly. To think that as we speak, we were just expecting about over 100,000 polling units results to ensure that the whole counting collation process will now be over. So with about nearly 60,000 polling units results coming in, we're seeing a direction of the polls already. And the Nigerians are largely satisfied as this is coming in, because, like I've always maintained, there is no expectation of a perfect process, but a process that is conducted in such a manner that even losers will have confidence that they lost gracefully, not because of the dereliction or the failure or the irresponsibility of the election managers in the institution of INEC. So that's what we're working to see now. Right now, parties are apprehensive. There are some who have even confidently, mistakenly, brazenly, congratulated themselves, called the election for themselves, but the results coming in seem to be changing. Lagos is teaching a lot of political lessons to the politicians as we speak. It shows that there is a shift, that there's a possibility that issues can actually drive campaign, and that Lagos being a coalescence of pride and tolerance can actually be an example where it will happen that a candidate that is indeed popular can transcend the barriers of tribe and religion. And that's what the Lagos result is showing. And we're also seeing the magnanimity of the residents of Lagos, I don't want to say the originals of Lagos, who are taking it kindly, even though there are reports of anger and betrayals. But we are confident that with the call from the APC quarters that for CAM, there's expected to be reports of violence in the long run. There is a significant improvement in this election so far compared to the 2019 elections. Especially not because of technology alone, but the shift from, a sort of bullion van politics in quote, where money, the application of money tried to unduly influence the choice of voters. That process has been actually reduced very much this time around. So even though there are complaints, several complaints, especially with regards to persons who believe that they have been deliberately disenfranchised, INEC has a primary principal, constitutional and statutory responsibility not to allow any Nigerian to believe that he has been deliberately disenfranchised. So it's a very progressive thing to think that INEC has considered many of those reports from Bielsa that they were not giving voting materials, and INEC officials didn't show up at all. And to the extent, INEC now has ordered postponement of those elections. Some of them were actually held on Sunday. Until those elections are actually held, there probably will not be a return in those states at all. So by and large, and in conclusion, for me, walking around the situation rooms in Abuja, in the Transport Hilton and in the Nikon Luxury, together with talking with international journalists and observers, the election so far has recorded significant improvement, and it's good for our democracy.
All right, significant improvement, you say. Some would think otherwise, Frank. And Arise just brought us the press conference from the APC's PCC, and Dele Alake, Festus Kediamo, and not forgetting quite a lot of others actually came and defended INEC, some would say, and also gave them a pass mark. But one sticking issue that they actually brought to the fore was what Dino Melaye raised in the day, talking about uploading of results into the IREV. And some have said that the PDP are claiming that INEC has dropped the ball. The APC are insisted INEC are on track and they are doing the right thing. Constitutionally, that first of all, the Constitution must take preeminence before you talk about the Electoral Act and guidelines from INEC. Now, talk to us, try to untangle this for us as it stands right now. What do you think is actually right, or which position is actually the correct position? Is it that of the PDP or the APC as we speak?
The Constitution does not give details. It doesn't talk about the details of the processes involved in the election. It delegates that to the National Assembly to make a law to regulate a commission that is supposed to manage election, and that is the Independent National Electoral Commission. To that extent, there is a robust law that has been enacted, which is guiding this election, which is the Electoral Act of 2022. In that act, particularly if you look at section, the sections regulating the conduct of election, there is also no express mention of when it comes to uploading results for electronically. There was not such an express mention of that. Yet, the Electoral Act under section 149 and section 150 all give INEC the powers, the extended delegated powers to make rules, regulation, and guidelines to guide the process of election. INEC enjoys extreme application of discretion in the way it manages this election. Now, what is expected under the provisions of the Electoral Act is that there will be collations at the various collation points, so that the local government's collation center or the state collation centers, and according to the guidelines, which I agree to an argument, and I think we shouldn't defer to the fact that who is right and who is wrong. We should hold on to common standards that are applicable to all the players, including INEC and the political parties. What is expected is that there's a form of communication of the result sheets, the actual fiscal result sheets to INEC. Now, if the guidelines provide for a confidence-building measure that the same BVAS machine that is used for accreditation, that has the possibility of taking pictures and then uploading, what is it, uploading and then sending to the central server? What is important by law is that whatever the figures are that are transmitted whatever is contained in the document in the result sheet must correspond with each other. Anytime there is a discrepancy, INEC again under section 165 is called upon to review the process, to review the decision with regards to balloting, with regards to polling, and then ultimately make a declaration. It doesn't end there. It proceeds in the expectation that giving freedom to any of the candidates or any of the political parties to protest. But by section 65 expressly mentions that the form of protest should be approaching the court and not any form of resorting to underhand tactic or playing to the gallery. I don't want to take any position here, but I believe very strongly that if there was as INEC had put in his guidelines and in his regulation, for the election to be, for the result sheet to be snapped, to be photographed by the Vivas machine and ultimately transmitted, it is simply a confidence building measure which should increase the transparency of the election and not necessarily a mandatory thing to be done. What is important is that there is an accreditation process, there is polling, the votes are counted, they are recorded, and the actual results sheets are transmitted to the Central Collation Center, which is the International Conference Center right now, which is the National Collation Center chaired by the supposedly returning officer, who is the INEC chairman.
Now, Mr. Tete, a number of areas saw the outbreak of electoral violence and ballot snatching, including here in Lagos. So I'd like to know what this says about the level of preparedness of our security forces. Of course, you recall all the show of force that we witnessed before the election and all the tough talk from security agencies. What does that say about their level of preparedness? And then how do we prevent a repeat of such violence during the governorship election? We already have some party officials warning civil servants who do not deliver their polling units to the governor of Lagos State to work on Monday. How do we curb electoral violence going forward?
Electoral violence and electoral intimidation, and then inducement. These are things that I will always plague our elections. But I've witnessed a number of elections. In theory, studied quite a number of elections from 1964 through 1979, 1983 to the present elections, and then the famous 1993 elections. What I can tell you, in comparison with the 2019 election, is that there is a measure of reduction of violence. I saw the elections in the wake of return to democracy in 1999. It wasn't 1998, 1999. They were also ridden with a lot of violence and abuse of money. This time around, we expected more. The International Crisis Group expected the worst of times in 2015. It did happen, where President Goodluck Jonathan averted that with that phone call. But what we have experienced now is that we have it on record that in several places, policemen were just idling away without much work to do, except in places where tempers were rising as a result of the dereliction of INEC officials. But in Lagos and some other places where there were clear-cut invasion of polling areas, polling units by gunmen, by perpetrators of violence, we also saw that there was no appropriate response from the security agencies. That is a minus. Let me tell you this: if we want to curb violence in the coming election, I'm talking about in the governorship elections in March, it depends a whole lot on INEC and its officials. And then INEC must first of all realize this before I address that particular issue, that its failure in 2019 to punish many of its staff that actually disrupted the elections, that created room for violence and protestations, we actually contributed again to the worst situation we had in Lagos. That's why, for example, when it was time for INEC officials to show up for the elections, they were not there. The ones who came did not bring electoral materials. However, what is important is this. We have records, we have reports of police actually taking down a particular party stalwart for trying to disrupt the counting process. In fact, lethal weapon was used, and the report, even though it's not widely confirmed was that he was shot dead. That's a response from the police authorities with regards to trying to secure the ballot. Is that important? However, what the panacea to a situation where we would not resort too much of securitization of policing or militarization of our elections as it once was, is for INEC to simply do a good job. So INEC should take a whole lot of the blame. It can cure this, it can prevent this, if it gives a list of its officials that contributed to the negligence, to the failures that occurred in Lagos and Bayelsa and other places. Let me tell you, particularly, INEC requires, under Section 120, the Section 120 of the Electoral Act, INEC requires an explanation from any of its officers where there are cases of late coming. It's not enough that in cases where you don't show up at all, INEC needs to publish the names of those officials who ought to be in those polling units that didn't show up. And the law, particularly in Section 120, subsection 2 and 3, require from these officials to give written explanations to INEC why they were not there. And for the ones that came late, they are required by law to give explanation. It doesn't end there. Whatever explanations they give, they will be further subjected to trial because they are truncating a very important process that holds the society together when they choose not to come. Let me tell you, there is a particular oath that officials who conduct our elections take, and that they are committed to it with all that they have. When they fail, it amounts to a very serious offense. And I think that 12 months imprisonment is even a light offense, or given an option of fine of mere 500,000 naira, it makes it light. And that's why these persons can choose to say they are not coming. In fact, anybody who knows that he cannot deliver on the responsibility of being an INEC staff or an INEC ad hoc staff should not take it, because if they take it, they have